Hey, Dusty. See, there's a few people online already. Um, I'll just trust that you can hear me until somebody says otherwise in the chat. So I'll just start and yeah. Anybody of you guessed who I had that thumbnail in today's chat that Emma took? And I tried to mimic one of the great guitarists doing a funny face. Anybody guessed who it was? I guess it looked more like I was sneezing or something, but did my very best. So, if you guessed who I might have been, you can write it to the chat. Hey, Damien. Okay, so we're going to talk about strings, string gauges. And the title, Heavy Strings Punchier Sound or Not. Well, let me start off with a little story that has nothing to do with guitars, but then again, by the end of it, you might realize that it has everything to do with guitars, and it has everything to do with a lot of things that we do in our lives and choices we make and the paths we walk. So my wife once told me this funny story about a family with a special Christmas tradition. Their mother always used to cut off a certain part of the ham before putting it into the oven. And one day she was teaching the art of preparing the Christmas ham to her daughter, who then immediately asked, why does the slice need to be cut off? The slice that she always cut off, sliced off from side of the ham. And the mother answered, that's the way it's supposed to be done. That's how my mother taught me. It's important. But the daughter wasn't very happy with the answer and called up her grandma, who laughed and explained, well, I used to cut off a slice because our oven was so small that otherwise the ham wouldn't have fitted in. And, you know, this little Christmas ham story is a perfect example of how oftentimes traditions are born. You know, there's some practice that at one point of time for some human being or group of human beings made perfect sense. But with time, the original purpose of that action, that practice, is forgotten, and but the habit still keeps, it's still alive in the family. So it becomes it's family tradition that actually is kind of a purposeless habit, as a matter of fact. And what does this has to do with guitar strings then? Guitar string gauges and all sorts of myths and opinions that a lot of people have about it. Like, I mean, we have opinions about everything, but where are those opinions based? What is the basis of somebody saying that, that you have to have, string gauge 12s, you have to play 12s. That's going to be the great sound. You have the wrong strings, you have to play 12s or 11s or whatever it is for whoever person. And where does it come from? What drives and what kind of, what is the purpose of that? And well, there is one player who seriously shuffled the deck regarding string gauges back in the 1980s, and this was Stevie Ray Vaughan. Before Stevie Ray, a lot of this is not black and white, and I don't know exactly the history, and there's always somebody who knows these things better. But Stevie Ray Vaughan has had definitely a very heavy input and sort of influence in what came after, especially in all kinds of roots among blues players and so. And Stevie Ray played really heavy strings. Have you seen his hands in the videos and in the photographs? Gorillas have similar looking paws, but they're just a bit smaller than Stevie Ray's, So Stevie Ray had his reason to use heavy gauge strings in his guitars. That then somehow translated into one kind of tradition that, to be a real blues player, blues rock player, you have to have heavier gauge strings. But then when you kind of look back into the history of that, what's going on, and different players string gauges that they've been using, it's kind of surprising, at least for me, because I've never been such a, I've never, sure, I have, I'm listening to I'm listening to music a lot, and I have my favorites. I have all kinds of different favorite guitarists. Could be fusion players, could be metal players, could be jazz players, could be blues players, all kinds of different players. And but I've never really somehow been kind of, nerding, or how would you say that? I haven't kind of studied exactly, especially when I was younger, and I kind of learned to play guitar. I never really studied very heavily that, what gauge strings, what kind of setup, what I might have looked at what kind of amps they were using, and if you want to sound like Tony Iommi, what kind of amp should you have, or if you want to sound like Richie Blackmore, what kind of guitar should you? But it was more like younger, when I still had my sort of fantasies to become a rock star or whatever, make a career out of playing guitar. I was more at that time making my own music and kind of trying to find my path, and so I kind of stumbled upon these details later, and to me it's been really surprising. Maybe you guys know it better, how all players, what kind of setups do they have. But I just checked for this live stream some of them, and BB King played 08 strings, so 08 to 38 or something like that. BB King, who has that majestic king, or like a really super powerful sound. And I've seen BB King live one time in my life. He was headlining at Puisto Blues, Lakeside Blues Festival in Finland, a long time ago, obviously. And I remember when he climbed on stage and, okay, the band started playing. There was the orchestra leader, and they were doing their thing and um, kind of growing the tension until the BB King himself walked on stage. And then when he took that first note from his guitar, it was like, okay, this is the real thing. This is how you play the blues. And now thinking back that, okay, he had 8 strings in the guitar and it sounded like that, you know, to me it's kind of mind-boggling, but interesting at the same time. And other players as well, like Jimi Hendrix, 09 to 38, Jimmy Page, 08. Well, Tony Iommi played 832 in D sharp tuning and 942 in C sharp tuning, or plays, as I found from the mighty all-knowing Google. Tony Iommi is a good example, of course, having a reason why such strings. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the story with his fingers, how he had an accident and or from his right hand, in his case, lefty player. So he plays super light gauge and started playing super light gauge strings originally, if I've been informed correctly, because of his accident, and he couldn't play heavier strings. He needed to find the lightest possible strings and super low action so that he could actually use his fingers with this kind of extensions that he built. And so, okay, so he had a reason, like the grandmother in the family, the story I told you about the Christmas ham. The grandmother had a good reason. Their ham didn't fit into their small oven, so she had to do it a certain way. Her daughter wouldn't have needed to, but that's the way she had learned it, so she kept on doing it, and it would have potentially become family tradition for generations if the daughter of the family wouldn't have questioned the origin of that specific tradition. So anyway, and of course there are, like, AC/DC. Angus Young plays very light gauge strings, but at the same time Malcolm Young heavier, very heavy strings. Okay, he's the rhythm player, but anyways, I mean, and like Dusty's saying there, Sean is saying there, Billy Gibbons super light strings, 8 strings as well. Yeah, and so there's all kinds of different players. And what kind of one of the things that triggered me also, or let's say it this way, in one of my earlier streams, we talked about, or kind of I mentioned, somebody asked about string gauges. I think it was Mibu asked me about, who is here again. Mibu, hey. Shaggy's faction is here too. Great. Yeah, so Mibu asked me about lighter, heavier strings, something I can't remember exactly the question, but then we talked about it for a while, and it kept haunting me after that. We should go a bit deeper in that. And so I remember when I started thinking of the topic for this stream, I remembered that Christmas ham story that Emma's been telling me, because it kind of fits to a lot of different situations. In private life, in business, in all kinds of things. How we people are. We tend to kind of stick to our routines and habits, and without thinking that which ones of them make sense and which maybe don't, and which should be questioned, whether there's sense to question some of my habits. that I'm following. And then a friend of mine, Junnu, pointed me to a video, because I mentioned to him that I would like to maybe do a live stream about string gauges, and so he mentioned to me about a video that is on YouTube by Rick Beato. I think it's, what is it called? It's called, okay, it's a bit kind of lightweight video and weirdly biased with, with the kind of a clickbait title like "You're using the wrong strings" or something like that. And kind of partly the video made me think that, that like the actual point might be, I'm not saying it is, but it, that might have been to advertise a certain string brand. And but I'll use that video as an example to make a point. So in the beginning, Rick, what is David saying? No Beato, no Rick Beato, Beato. How do you say that? Beato, Beato. Somebody must tell me. Anyway, yeah. So I'm using that video as an example to make a point, because I think it makes a good point. Maybe not the point that he actually meant to say in it, but the kind of connection that I made after watching the video. So in the beginning, Rick points out correctly that light gauge strings were very popular back in the day. So in the 60s and the 70s, it was really like that was the mainstream. That was everybody was using that. And he mentions that also that light gauge is his personal favorite. And then Rick and his friends record a few riffs played with 4 different gauge strings and land in a somewhat unanimous conclusion that the lightest string sounded the tightest when recorded. That's what their video was about. It was just kind of very focused in that. They had one sound in the amplifier. They played, very simple to prove a point, that the lightest gauge strings sounded the tightest when recorded. And okay, so well, the Finnish style, extremely thorough but a little bit mad scientist in me, raised its ugly head when watching that video, and that scientist within me started pointing out all kinds of things that were kind of off. From my first round watching that video, and until I kind of realized that, as a matter of fact, what Rick did in the video, yeah, he has a lot of followers. He's what's the term for that? He's an influencer, yes. So, but as a matter of fact, what Rick did was in that video that he pointed out his personal opinion based on the priorities, based on those priorities that he puts first when choosing the string gauge he wants to use. Period. There's kind of nothing more to it. It was his personal opinion, and obviously there's nothing wrong with his opinion, and there's nothing off in his opinion, so it was fine. Except that the whole, and this is the point I'm now making, that the whole idea of saying, you're playing with the wrong strings because blah, 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 whatever the reason, is obviously off big time. Why? Because it's purely a subjective matter. What works for one player for some particular reason might not work at all for another person. So, I could tell you one story from my personal experience. we made a guitar. This is, it could be 10 years ago, it could be 15 years ago, I can't remember. But we made a guitar to blues player Josh Smith. I'm sure some of you know him. He's been touring in Europe many times. He's a really top guitarist from California, and he not only is a guitarist, but he has a great voice. He's a great singer as well. I dig his singing as much as I dig his guitar playing. So anyway, we made a guitar for him back in the day, and this was a Duke Sonic, and on models, and you know, Josh Smith, I don't know what gauge strings he uses nowadays, but at that time he used 13, 17, 26, and I'm talking about 26 plain, not 26 wound string, 26 plain string. 13, 17, 26, the plain strings, and then 36, 44, 56. And this guitar was tuned in the standard tuning. And okay, so I got these instructions from him, and when we got the guitar ready, I had to ask Josh that I think you might have given me the wrong string gauges, because this is, I cannot make this guitar play. I mean, okay, anything else but the 26 G string, plain G string in standard tuning, G 26 plain, even in short scale guitar, when I tried to play it, it was like donk. There was no sustain. There was just, no matter where I fretted that string, it was like donk, 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 like shorter sustain than in banjo. It's very short sustain in that string. So I was just, it's impossible to play this. So and he just tells me that no, it's right. You just string it up with that set and blah blah blah. So okay, and I was thinking, Josh Smith plays the wrong strings. He doesn't know what he's talking about. This is this doesn't work. And I thought that, okay, customer is right even when he's wrong. That's what I was thinking when we got the guitar ready. And after we got it ready, and I took the guitar with me to California. We were going to the NAMM show. I was going to meet Josh there. We were friends. We had seen each other, seen each other many times their earlier years. And so anyway, so I bring the guitar with me to the NAMM show, to LA, to Anaheim, and hand it over to him. And man, it's like when he picked up the guitar, plugged it in, started playing, it was, I swear, if it would be physically possible, my jaw would have dropped to the floor, because he could make the guitar sing like, it was beautiful. And the G string, the plain 26 G string, in his hands, it was like, woo, and it was like, just, what was going on? I couldn't wrap my mind around it, what was happening. But he could make that guitar sing. So again, remember I said my first thought was that the customer is, wrong, and he makes a mistake. He doesn't know what he's doing. But I I just hadn't experienced that. So he knew exactly what he was doing. He knew it, how it's going to work out, how it's going to play in his hands with the strength that he's giving to the strings, the energy that he's putting to his guitar strings. And now you put a guitar to his hands that has, 08 strings, and it's absolutely useless for him. He couldn't play that guitar. Well, he could play that guitar, but he wouldn't feel at home with that guitar at all. Because for him, the guitar represents something else. And he must have the strength of a bull, an ox, to bend those strings like he does. It was crazy. Anyway. So I'm going to look a few questions here. There's been many comments here. Hello, everybody. Poo Ninja is here. I'm seeing very many familiar Banhammer Beetle. Banhammer, okay. Sorry, guys. I don't know what it means, but go ahead. Tuomas, hey. From Tuomas says here. What do you say, Tuomas? Tuomas is saying, from my perspective, since the 80s, it's about how tough you are. For one reason or another, it feels that you are the better player, the heavier strings. But again, why work so hard? I think this was the comment that I read from somewhere that, B.B. King was saying also, that why work so hard when you can do it lighter? And when you're playing solo and he's not a rhythm player, he's just focusing on getting the solos right. So it's just like, it's as economic, as ergonomic as possible. So it's kind of like that. Yeah, how can I take that away? Okay, there it went. So this is one aspect. Again, I'm not saying this is the right aspect, because when I'm doing that, I'm doing the same thing as Rick was doing with this video. You're playing with the wrong strings. Let's not go there. Let's not go there, at least yet. We can go there in a minute. If I have also some strong opinions, let's see if I do or not. So Sean is saying here, I agree. Why hurt yourself when you should be enjoying? Yeah. Yeah. And Mibu saying here, that's not accurate. It's like testing cables, keeping the same EQ on the amp. I think he might be referring to to Rick's video, maybe. I think. Yeah, David. I have 11s on my drop C guitar, 10s on my Tele, 9s on my shred guitar. And to you, I can say, whatever floats your boat, go for it. Poo Ninja says, for me, it's about how do they feel. Balanced on an acoustic and big bottomed on electrics. Yeah, so exactly. I mean, this is something that it's easy for me to agree with all of you guys here. And going back to the wait. Punija, I knew I've got the wrong fingers. My strings are fine. Well, that's one way to look at it. But seriously, if the tighter low end, again, I'm going back to the Rick's video, that you're playing the wrong strings. If the tighter low end on a recorded track, for example, tighter low end on a recorded track. Those of you who haven't watched that video, I think it's a good video to watch, because I think it's an eye-opening video for, when, because you might think easily that if let's forget about our playing, um, you know the type of playability that each one of us is accustomed to. Let's forget about that. Let's forget about all of that and just think of the recorded sound, in a studio situation. We only look at that particular uh, scenario, and don't think about how the guitars play, how I'm going to play that track. But I think it's kind of surprising, at least for me it was surprising, even though I understand it, that with a low with a lighter gauge strings, there is less bottom end in them, which then actually results that when you record that track and you need the guitar to fit into the role of the electric guitar, because you have the bass, you have the drums, you have the other instruments, and you need that super tight guitar track. You usually don't need a lot of bass in the sound for the rock electric guitar. I'm not talking about solo recording where you're the solo artist and there is no other instruments, but I'm talking about kind of rock record, and listening to all those isolated tracks, how they actually, the guitar tracks on the legendary albums that we listen to, how did they sound? It's usually pretty mid mids and highs, and not so much bass. But anyway, so again, if the tighter low end on a recorded track, for example, is the number one priority that you're looking for, then it's great. I felt that it was great to kind of think that, yeah, I might not necessarily need to spend money to buy more pedals or to change the pickups or buy new amp or whatever, to get that tighter sound. I could just try different strings in my guitar. Um, I think it was useful information in that. So thank you, Rick. Beato, for that. I need to learn that name next time. Sorry, I'm a rookie here, so I hope you can forgive me that. But then again, if the priority is something else, say an example. Okay, I'm gonna take a funny example, but if you, let's say, if you're like me, I'm quite confident guy making guitars, and I'm even rather confidently doing these live streams. I'm kind of surprised, but give me a guitar and force me to perform, and I'm outside my comfort zone, and I become nervous. I don't know why. Maybe it's some traumas, some mother issues. I don't know. Not mother issues. I don't have any mother issues anymore. Anyway, yeah. So give me a guitar, put me on stage, and I start performing, and I'm both excited. It's great. It's fun. It's great. But I'm also nervous. I'm scared. And maybe I would play in a band. It requires a lot of jumping on stage. The stage show requires that. So these things together result in a situation where when I'm nervous and I'm kind of excited and nervous, I tend to grasp the strings too much. So I take a too strong grip in my guitar. I know how I should take the grip, so I'm in tune, but when I'm nervous, I'm gripping too much and I'm out of tune. So I might on this scenario, I might want to use heavier gauge strings because I know that with these strings, I will easier stay in tune better. And so this is also a great thing to know for me, and now for you, you knew it already, but anyway, that heavier gauge strings might actually help you staying better in tune if you happen to grip too much and your guitar teacher tells you that you're gripping too much and asks you to ease out. One thing is that, okay, sure, to go for more economic, use only the energy that is required to make the notes play clean, without fret buzz because you're not pressing enough, but not use any excess energy to kind of push the strings into the fretboard and play the chord sharp. Yeah, it's good to know that this is something that you might want to try. Also, one step heavier gauge strings. Okay, there's a lot of questions again. Let's see. Billy Gibbons 8s. Billy Gibbons plays 8s. Yes. Any opinions? I think Gibbons has a great sound. He has had a really great sound. Very powerful, great sound. I have my favorite albums that are some of the older ones, but I think still he has a great sound. And I don't give a damn what string gauge he uses. I think it's as long as it kind of takes him where he needs to go with his guitar, I think it's great. Those that Tuomas was earlier saying about that it's something that you kind of you're tougher, you need to be you're cool when you play heavier gauge strings. For some genres of music and players, it's maybe true. In the metal scene, it's kind of not so much. I mean, it's kind of more, I think, common that Yngwie Malmsteen or whoever. I mean, they play really light gauge strings, and a lot of solo players, like I don't know what Eddie Van Halen. What I think I might have even have it here. No, I don't. One of you guys knows, and if you don't, Google knows everything. So, but anyway. So being tougher, being cooler when you're playing heavier gauge strings. A lot of the players that are often seen, like some of the really toughest, coolest players, are actually playing these really thin, light gauge strings. And on stage, when they play, they look like they're putting a lot of energy into the guitar, and they look like they're hitting hard, and they have those funny faces, like I was doing my funny face. And the point was, I was trying to be BB King. Somebody said Eric Clapton there, but I was trying to be BB King. and the point I was trying to make is that, I don't know how it looked like. I tried to look like I'm playing these heavy gauge strings, even though I knew that BB King was playing 8s. So things aren't always as they look like. The show is a show, and playing is playing. And it's obvious that when you're playing really light gauge strings, you need to play that instrument differently. Sure, you cannot put, and that's where you kind of things get also kind of funny and off when somebody comes in, somebody plays with really light gauge strings, and then somebody comes, let me try your guitar, and takes the guitar and takes a chord and takes, oh, it's so light gauge strings, I can't play this thing, it's shit. But you can't make that opinion. I mean, it's okay, you can, but it's just kind of bullshit, because obviously that guy just doesn't know how to play that instrument that is strung up like that. Anyway. Okay, Mibu saying also electrically, the electromagnet, let's put it here. You can read it. Electromagnetic flux is slightly bigger using heavier strings. So the tone is slightly altered. Yeah, I was actually reading about this too at some point, and this goes two ways. You know, heavier, let's take an example. Let's take an example, Telecaster, Mibu. You know why I would say it's Telecaster. I'm not using my variation name of that model for a reason, because I'm not here selling my instruments. Somebody else can say that. I'm not going to say it. But anyway, and if I happen to slip some of my guitar names and do some marketing, don't tell anybody. It's a secret between me and you, because this stream is supposed to not be that. It's supposed to be free of that, because I like it. I like it that way. Yeah, I was reading about this electromagnetic flux and Telecaster, and the Telecaster is strung, let's say, 09s, and as a comparison, it's strung up with 11s. Or let's say 12s. Let's go 12s with a wound string. I don't know why it needs to be so detailed. I have no idea. But anyway, the heavier string actually, because it's tighter when you play it. So the vibration it does. I mean, there is a kind of like a sweet spot with the strings always, that you put really light gauge strings and you need to feed it with a little bit of energy, and it starts vibrating very much because the string is a bit loose. So it starts to make a big vibration, and this vibration is what generates the magnetic flux. But when you have heavier gauge strings, eventually you go heavier, you know, you reach to the point where the strings don't vibrate so much anymore because they're so tight. You understand what I mean? You need to put a lot more energy to it, obviously, but still there comes a point where the string just doesn't anymore vibrate. Like, as an exaggerated example was the one I mentioned, Josh Smith 026 plain string, standard tuning, G note. And the open note, with a normal person like me, who's not built like an ox or whatever, doesn't have the gorilla's paws, I couldn't give that amount of energy to the string that I could make it ring anymore. And so it didn't move the magnet, it didn't generate any magnetic flux, electromagnetic flux at that point. Because the string is the thing that generates it. So there's a kind of a sweet spot, but it's not black and white. So yeah. And okay, Mibu continues here. Heaviest, you mean with heavier strings, of course, you can have bigger lows, but the amp should be set accordingly. So the overall tone can be fuller. Yes, exactly. And so this is all, again, goes to the kind of the whole thinking of the scenarios that, you know, how can one say that this setup is wrong and that setup is right? It's just kind of bizarre and ridiculous in a way. Because there are players who feel at home with heavy gauge strings, and of course they do their setup, their signal chain, and whatever they adjust things fit to that guitar, to that setup, and that's what makes it work. And then you change, you know, the one of the early links in the chain, meaning the guitar you put there, these wimpy, sorry, for that guy, wimpy light gauge strings, and it doesn't work anymore because the whole setup is different. David, what gauge brand strings do you use in your personal guitars? I'm a very practical guy. We can talk about string brands in a while, but string gauges. So I'm as long as I can remember, I was using first of all, most of my personal guitars that I have quite a few guitars. I'm not a guitar collector, but I have some historic guitars. Maybe they're not like they're not many. The monetary value is not huge, but they might have some historic value. Maybe some old handmade instrument made in Finland back in the 50s, or made in Sweden back in the 40s, or something like that. So, but they aren't maybe. I'm not a rich guy, so I don't have a big collection of expensive guitars. So, but the guitars that I'm mostly playing, they are short scale guitars. So they're 24.75 scale guitars, and as long as I can remember, I was using 1052 strings, and I would always play in standard tuning. And now that I think of it, why did I use all those years? Why did I use 1052 heavy bottom strings? I liked it because I played a lot in a trio. I liked to have low end in a guitar. And I needed that kind of tightness there because when we did a gig, I was nervous, so I put heavier gauge strings. But also one of the initiating factors why I went for that string gauge was because one of my all-time favorite guitarists is a Finnish guy, Jukka Tolonen. He later became also a customer. He bought a guitar, he bought another guitar, whatever. But long before that, when I was a kid, I was listening to Jukka. He's like a jazz. For those who don't know, he's a jazz fusion legendary. Maybe he's out of all-time Finnish guitarists. For me, he's the top. The gold medal goes to him. But there are a few guys. Jukka is one of the really, really greats, and he has made an international career with the jazz fusion stuff. And he has played for a long time 1052 strings. And when I was a young guy, I was maybe 16 years old, I went to his gig and I asked him what string gauge he uses, and he told me 1052, and that's when I started using them. That was what drove me to use that gauge strings. And I think it's a good starting point, like when people are, when you're a big fan of Stevie Ray, when you're a big fan of Jimi Hendrix, whatever, I think it is a good idea to kind of, go into, or maybe, I don't know, it's maybe also about the personality of who you are and what drives you, how do you think, what makes you tick, and kind of, but I'm kind of now thinking that it's a good idea to explore and observe and experiment. That if your idol, if Jeff Beck used to play back in the day really thin gauge strings like 08s, and over the time he has kind of moved on to a bit thicker, a bit heavier strings. I believe it's now 1052 maybe, but whatever. But to try those and also check out what was his sound in the 70s. What was his sound? and try different approaches to find out how it works and really kind of give it a chance. Then, don't kind of condemn or judge it that, oh, I can't play this, this is too thick, this is too thin, it's too light, I can't play. No, you need to kind of adapt to that. Okay, now this is a different instrument, I can't put so much energy to it, but how does it ring when I play it with these strings? What do I need to do with this guitar to make these strings work in it? So it's kind of like a mind game like that. Anyway, going back, I know I've talked too much, very long answers to very simple questions. I used a long time 1052, then I went 46, and now I have in my favorite guitars I have 946 in one guitar and 942 standard 9 set in one of the guitars. And this is a unicorn, so this is a kind of a Les Paul style guitar, short scale with 942. I have that. Maybe it's because I'm playing less, I don't have that strength, so I kind of feel that I don't want to struggle to do the bends. I want to enjoy those little moments when I'm playing, and so, and also I have one guitar that is really low tuning, so it's a C sharp tuning, because we have this project, we're playing old Black Sabbath stuff, Aussie era Black Sabbath stuff. So I need one guitar like that, and this guitar, I think it has actually 1052 in C sharp tuning, and we can talk in a minute about the string brands. Sean, or Dusty as I know you. And by the way, those who don't know, go check out Dusty's, Sean Miller's profile and stuff. He sells cool guitars, many cool guitars from different parts of the world. And this was not advertisement, because he's not selling my guitars, at least yet. But go check it out, because he has some very cool stuff on his website. Okay, that was the advertising moment of this live stream. It's always nice to advertise friends that I'm not affiliated with yet. Anyway, on my electrics, I keep the same gauge. So when a string goes, I pick up the spare and buy 6 packs of the same gauge. 11s give me the across the board. So yeah. That's when you're gigging and rehearsing, you say in the next comment. Yeah, makes sense. Everything makes sense to me. Shaggy's Faction, I base my string gauge mainly on 2 things. They have to stay in tune, so not go sharp when playing heavy. Yeah, so kind of talking about that earlier, how they feel in your hands. Some guitars want different string even with the same scale. Wise words from Mr. Shaggy's Faction. Exactly. This is true. So when he actually mentioned cool things. He mentioned you base your string gauge on staying in tune, if you feel in your hands. Okay, those are already two priorities that could be conflicting with each other. At least for me, they have over the years. And then you're mentioning a third priority. Some guitars want different strings. And this is something that I have on my notes as well. So it's true that what works in one guitar might not work in another guitar, even with the same scale length. So, and it's also funny because one guitar might like tens when it's new, but in 20 years, when it has learned to vibrate more, and the wood has kind of, do you know what I mean with wood learning to vibrate more? is it funny? In an acoustic instrument, it's so totally obvious that a new instrument needs to open up. And when you've played it for a long time, it becomes a totally different instrument. But in an electric guitar is not different. It's just the differences are more subtle and slower. But it's there. It's definitely there. That when the more you play it and the more the wood vibrates, everything, all the parts kind of come together, the more sensitive the instrument becomes. And one day you might realize that, hey, this guitar actually likes more these lighter gauge strings than the heavier ones that I've been using. Because the heavier ones tend to kind of paralyze. And now it needs more sensitive strings to bring the nicest vibration, nicest resonance to my body from the instrument. And when plugged in, the acoustic feedback that comes from the amplifier, from the room, from the air pressure that comes from, pushes into the room from the speaker cabinet and makes the wood vibrate even more and all that, you might realize that this guitar actually, I can bring more nuances out of this guitar with lighter gauge strings. I have experienced that. So yeah. And here we have Axe Hessel. Lighter strings to make you play softer if you're used to heavier strings. Yes, obviously, you have to. You cannot play as heavy as you did with the heavier strings. Otherwise, you're going to sound like shit. You have to learn to play softer. And this is like I think I referred in my earlier stream when we kind of touched this topic. I mentioned guys like John McLaughlin. I mentioned maybe Yngwie Malmsteen or Richie Blackmore. Guys that all have thin gauge strings. They have high jumbo frets in their guitars, and the fretboards are scalloped. So you have all this space to fuck up if you play too much. You put too much energy from your fretting hand to that fretboard, to those strings, because you're going to be so out of tune unless you do what John McLaughlin is doing and uses it as an effect. Or my friend Peter Lerhe from Finland, another great, I don't know what kind of guitarist should I call him, an artist. He's a guitar love artist. Peter, you're not here, but I hope you watch this stream sometime later. Anyway, yeah. So, you can use it as an effect. With lighter strings, you can do things that you cannot do with heavier strings if you're not Josh Smith. I'm not. Anyway, I admire people who can put all that energy to a guitar and make it sing great. I mean, with heavier gauge strings, but I think it's as cool with whatever string gauge. I don't think there's a difference in that. I cannot categorize people with their string gauge. Okay, Pasi. Mark Spear of Kruangbin takes a 12 set, throws away the upper E, shifts all strings upward, and then puts a 10 at the bottom to make them bend more easily, he says. Could work. I haven't done that, but yeah. So do really nice boutique guitars because you don't want to scratch them. Rick should make a video about that. You've been playing the wrong guitars. Yeah, there's one thing that, how you kind of, what is your relationship with your instrument? Whether the instrument is something so valuable, noble, that you don't want to scratch it, or whether it's something else. There's a good topic for another live stream. It's a big topic. It's a good topic. We could talk about relic guitars. stuff like that. What do you think? So I'm not going to go deeper into that, but I'll just say this, that for me, the guitar, whether, okay, there are exceptions, like when making something a statement, like an art guitar, a statement that maybe, if I'm evaluating, for example, my work, our work at my shop, there are some instruments that I would value 80% as art pieces. So they have a different purpose than, they have an additional purpose, in addition to being musical instruments, there's something else. And there's been some pieces that this value sort of feels like it exceeds the value as a musical instrument, which is a very weird thought for me, because for me, the guitar, no matter what it is, if it's a 1959, burstless Paul original, to me it's a tool, it's a musical instrument. If it's the most valuable boutique guitar that is made to be played, that is not maybe made for that other purpose or any other purposes, like being an artwork in some gallery or something like that, to me, our guitars and boutique guitars, they're tools, and some scratch them, some don't scratch them, some treat them differently. But to me, it's a tool. It's a any tool, even with, if it's a cheap guitar, if it's your tool, if you like that guitar, whatever it is, a Squire from the 80s or whatever guitar it is, an old Jackson or whatever you have, and you like it, you should respect it. So don't treat it badly, treat it good, so it will do more good for you. But so I'm thinking of them as tools, and it's kind of a pity when one starts to tiptoeing around the instrument and doesn't kind of treat it as a tool, like a hammer. When I have a hammer, that hammer has a purpose, and the purpose is that it needs to drive the nails into the wood. And I need to dare to do it, because if I don't, if I start thinking about it, oh, this was so expensive hammer, I need to be careful, I'm gonna screw up and I'm gonna hurt myself with that hammer. So the only way to use the hammer right is to trust the hammer. It needs to be a good tool that I can trust, that I can drive the weight is right, and the head of the hammer is right. So when I hit the nail, I know what happens. It's not going to slip. It's not going to do, when I'm confident driving that nail into the wood, then the hammer will do its job. And it's exactly the same with guitars. Anyway, but I understand Axe Hessel's point, because sometimes boutique guitars are seen as so nice and fine objects that you don't want to, anyway. And I understand that. And I can't blame, I understand that. But I will still work on it. So you dare to do with your guitar whatever you want to do with your guitar. Play your guitar, play the crap out of your guitar. That's what it's for. It's a communication tool for you, for your soul, for your spill your guts out. If you're angry, if you're sad, if you're happy, you can bring all that out through your guitar with confidence. Yeah. Shaggy's faction for X. My English strat. Another Ibanez RG feels perfect with normal 942, but then my 25.5 inch scale Les Paul feels perfect 1052. Well, in standard tuning, I use 7 different gauges in my guitars. Experiment, people. It's good. Randy Stone with Ozzy was very focused. I love Randy's playing, and I love his sound. And what a such a tragedy. Oh, I would have wanted to see how what he would have become, maturing and growing up and all that. Damn. Eddie Van Halen plays nines according to Google. Thank you, Posse. One question. Okay, we are getting to the end of this, by the way. One question, why Elixir on your opinion? I mean, they are really great. Okay, Damien Caluzzi is asking here, why Elixir? Okay, so let's just talk about just a second about string brands. I've made a lot of notes, which I've now haven't looked at all. So it leaves a lot of topics for the future for us. It's good. Okay, let's go here. Where was that part? I want to remember what I was going to say about it. Okay, here. Yes. Elixir. Somebody knew I'm using Elixir. Yeah, I am using Elixir. It's mostly because I'm, not mostly, there's many reasons to it. But one of the reasons why in my personal guitars I'm using Elixir, why I started using Elixir and why I kept using Elixir is because I'm lazy at changing strings to my guitars. It's embarrassing to admit it, because this is something that I'm preaching about to everybody else. Change the strings to your guitars more often than you are doing now, because it does good for your sound, good for your playing, good for your tuning, good for everything, good for business too. Sell more strings. But Elixir strings have that thing in them that they just last and last and last. If you're not one of those players who break the strings, if you break strings, it might be because of your guitar, or it might be because of your technique, or it might be because of your string brand, because some strings break easier than other strings. And yeah, so Elixir is great for all possible pragmatic reasons. For practical reasons, Elixir is just a killer. They last forever. They last too long. They last so long that you wear them out from under. So they kind of, there comes these they wear these slots under the strings, and then you can't intonate it anymore. The chords don't play in tune, but you can still play, and they still kind of sound okay. They don't go muddy or anything. So I'm using them for that reason. That's also, I mean, when I started using Elixir a long time ago, it was time with the polyweb strings. There wasn't even nanoweb strings, let alone the OptiWeb, but it was the first kind of thicker coating that they had. I started using Elixir then in my personal guitars, and then soon after we started using it in the guitars, in our guitars as the default shop brand that we are installing to the guitars. Yeah, because they are great strings. Now, is there a better string than Elixir for sound? Yes, there is. There are some strings that I feel that have livelier sound. When I've strung up the guitar, I'm not going to go into brands here. Okay, somebody mentioned Elixir, so I'm not gonna go into brands too much. But there are some strings. They tend to be smaller makers of strings, and it could be often, let's say, round core strings, like kind of done the vintage way. I'm not too big fan of a nickel play, like a pure nickel strings, but they're kind of too soft for my personal taste, which doesn't make them bad strings. Remember, I'm talking about only my personal opinion here. And yeah, so I find there are some strings that are livelier sounding when I've strung the guitar up with them. New those strings, they beat Elixir the way they sound. But after 2 hours of playing, they go like the other way around. So after 2 hours of playing of Elixir set and that other set, that handmade something like that, after 2 hours or even less, 1 hour of active playing and sweating a bit, Elixir starts sounding better. They sound the same as new, but the other ones are kind of muddying up really fast. So that's my personal, I'm kind of a practical, pragmatic person. Those of you who have followed my articles on our website, about how we choose tuning machines, how we choose bridges, a lot of things to our guitars, they're often from pragmatic point of view, because I'm that guy. I love great sound, but at heart I'm also very practical. So I like things to last, and I like things to be kind of that. Okay, when I put a bridge to a guitar, I want to put a bridge that doesn't fail and doesn't need to change it. I don't want to go there to that extreme, that if I would get that extra little bit of sound by using this bridge, that will be not available in a year anymore because it's so exotic or whatever. So I make these kind of choices sometimes. Yeah, okay, so I'm getting here more questions. Which companies, luthiers, you take as icons of guitar making? Another time. We're going to do at some point later in time question and answers about my guitars, if it becomes unbearable, too much questions lined up. But I'm not going to go there now. Does the other brands of guitars are available? That's what they say on the radio anyway. Yes, true. Okay, there's dead notes, another topic. Great, we're gonna write that down. Dead notes, dead spots. It's worthy a topic for a whole stream. We're gonna talk about that other time. People need to start going. I need to start going too. So, do I have a conclusion here? Yes, I do. I have a conclusion for you. So, after watching Rick Beato's video, is there a scientific way to observe and conclude which string gouge sounds the best? Of course not, because sounds the best is a subjective matter. What sounds best to you doesn't sound best to me. I might have even different ears. I might have been built differently. I hear it, literally. I hear it differently than you hear. So, it depends on the player, depends on the guitar, depends on the set of priorities, the set of your priorities. So don't hang on too much to what the legends say. It's great to learn from them and to, remember, we're always standing on the shoulders of those who came before us. So it's good to learn and good to be humble. But just like that Christmas ham thing, you don't need to hang on there like forever. And I'll just conclude, don't listen to what Rick Beato says, and especially don't listen to what I say. When you feel right about your sound, your string gauge, your perfect guitar, that's it. And if you have ideas for Q&A topics, please send me email, leave a comment on this video. If you're still here, subscribe, like, do that stuff. And yeah, great. I've enjoyed, and every time these are getting just longer and longer, and I can hear in my mind my friend, my mentor Junnu, telling me that you need to make them shorter, people are getting bored, and I keep making them longer. So I don't seem to learn. But hey guys, take care, stay safe, have fun. Till next time.